Good evening and welcome to our first Funny Women event for the North. I was expecting my co-host James Court to open up this evening, but I think he's having some technical issues, so I'm going to take it from here. So at NatWest, we want to be the bank of choice for women in business. In 2019, Alison Rose led the Rose Review into Female Entrepreneurship commissioned by the Treasury. That showed that women who started and grew businesses at the same rate as men, it would add £250 billion to the UK economy. What a figure. We're working on implementing the 8 recommendations from the Rose Review across the industry to help achieve that, and we're pleased to be the founding members of the Investing in Women Code, alongside more than 60 other banks and financial institutions. Earlier this year, Alison Rose, the only female CEO of a high street bank, UK Bank, also announced our purpose to be the champion of UK businesses and to be the biggest supporter of startups in the UK and Republic of Ireland by helping create 50,000 new businesses by 2023 and supporting 500,000 people on their journey as part of what we aim that 60% support goes towards women. As part of that commitment, we will continue to organise events like this to support women in business. We know that this year has been very challenging for us all, with constant changing conditions due to COVID-19, and we've once again partnered with the fantastic Funny Women to bring you skills and techniques from the world of stand-up comedy to help us all navigate through this uncertain times with greater resilience and some sense of humour, which we all need, especially today after James's technical problem. So I'll now hand you over to Lynn from Funny Women to lead the proceedings today.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. Well improvised there. That's what it's all about in this world, isn't it, at the moment? So today's event is all about strategies to help you thrive in this environment, both in your workplace, which is quite likely to be your home as well. In my case, it's my basement, and in your lives outside of work. Virtual reality is here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. And we will continue to use it as a component of the way we work and communicate going forward beyond lockdowns and the hopefully even the relaxing of social distancing. But I don't think things are going to change overnight. Now, this is hard for all of us, particularly right now with the second lockdown and the continued uncertainty. We're all really excited about the promise of a COVID vaccine, but we know that that's a long-term thing. It's not going to happen immediately. So it's all about finding strategies and ways to work now and getting the best out of your life, both professionally and personally, getting that balance right between work and play and being open really to what might be coming in the future. Now, my personal view, if I may indulge you for a minute, is that resilient people are very adept at working with what they've got and in the moment. And comedy is certainly very much an industry that thrives on that. Planning is great, but what happens when it all goes wrong, as we saw today? There has to be a backup plan. There always has to be, even if you never use it. And without sounding like one of my heroes, Bear Grylls, I wish, those who survive are really good at improvising and pivoting and changing things as they go along. They take quick, positive action and they think creatively about the situation they find themselves in. Now, working in comedy has taught me a lot more than I already knew about living in the moment and about speaking up for myself and sometimes not caring too much about what people think of me. Indeed, Funny Women was born out of a very tricky situation when I was working for a publicist who was an extremely misogynistic person, and he questioned me as to why, when I questioned him actually about why he never booked any women, he told me that women weren't funny, and furthermore, there were no funny women. Well, that's about as close as I've ever got in my career to a light bulb moment. But Funny Women, as it is today, is a nationwide and increasingly, thanks to the pandemic, global community for women to perform, write, and create comedy. And right at its heart are our Funny Women Awards. So actually setting it up was my response to that gentleman all those years ago. Now, coming to comedy sideways through my experience originally as a journalist, publicist and marketer, I have now spent 18 years promoting and producing women in comedy. And I encourage them to have a voice And we've just completed our 17th year of the Funny Women Awards, despite the restrictions of the lockdown. I'm extremely proud of that. It is my life's work, and I am thrilled that the other part of my business, which is to bring projects like this to life through using the tricks of the trade that we develop in comedy, very much in the business sphere, and for women to improve their personal confidence. So along with me today, I have they're all my favourites, but today's favourites are two wonderful inspirational women that I work with as comedians and advisors to Funny Women, Rachel Krieger and Jo Fletcher Cross, who hopefully are about to join me on screen. Well, first of all, Rachel is going to join me on screen, and hopefully she's there. There she is, the lovely Rachel with all her books. Rachel, I did a little bit of research before these events, and I asked Rachel to tell me about her biggest challenge during lockdown. And she said, not treating my family as either my audience or fellow comics. My teenager does not want to hear my top bants, which
you've made that very clear.
Yeah. And I also asked her what she was most proud of. And quite rightly, she said, my new chat show, Jew Talking to Me, which is a podcast that she hosts with a gentleman called Philip Simon. And she said it's her lockdown project, and it's taken on a life of its own, and it certainly has, and it's wonderful. Rachel is an award-winning comedian, director, writer, and resident MC at London Pro Comedy Club upstairs at the Adam and Eve when it is open. She is, most significantly, the only practicing Orthodox Jewish woman on the UK comedy circuit. And she also guests regularly on BBC Radio London. So I think that's enough of an introduction, Rachel. And I'm going to hand it over to you now. And do have fun. And over to Rachel.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm not going to ask your names because there's no way for me to find out. But lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you. And I'm going to talk about the pressure to perform, which we all feel. When this all began, people in our industry, the arts industry, found that it was constantly mentioned that Shakespeare had achieved a lot when he was in lockdown, because the bubonic plague ran from 1603 to 1615. And during that time, they figured out that it was to do with two things: rats and people in very close proximity. So there was a lockdown, a quarantine, a shutdown. And what they did was close theatres and also brothels for 78 months. And during that time, Shakespeare wrote Antony and Cleopatra, King Lear, and Macbeth. He obviously had a lot of time on his hands once they closed down the brothels. I wonder which tier system they were on, I was just thinking. But it's also unlikely that Shakespeare had to look after kids, to manage a household, to do his tax return, to try and book an online shopping slot with any of the major supermarkets. That probably wasn't on his mind too much. I don't know what it's been like for you, but for me, lockdown has been like living in a Big Brother house where all the cast are my immediate family, only I'm not allowed to set them shopping tasks, and apparently it's illegal to vote them off and evict them. And homeschooling has been another pressure. It's been a complete nightmare. I've got a teenager at home, as I mentioned, and I was constantly having emails from his school about unfinished work that wasn't being sent in. And I don't know what they expected from me, like to give him a detention. He was stuck in his room. I said to him, actually, you know what, when you're a grandfather, this thing that we're all living through now, the pandemic, that is going to be on your grandchildren's GCSE syllabus. And they're going to come to you and say, Grandpa, what was it like during Corona? And all you'll be able to say is, I don't know. I was in my room for 7 months shooting zombies. And occasionally my mum would bring me a plate of sandwiches. It's a lot of pressure for everybody. I think lockdown is sending us all a bit crazy in terms of the pressure we put on ourselves. We're trying to do all these different things and be nice to people as well. And that is very, very hard. For example, I wanted to challenge a parking ticket recently, and I sent the email in with all my challenge and complaints, whatever, but I still signed it off, stay safe. I don't think I really meant that. But it's become part of our psyche to be seen to be being nice and to be seen to be doing the right thing and be a helpful neighbour. I mean, we've got a neighbourhood group where we're trying to support each other. And I put on our WhatsApp group, I'm just popping out for a few bits. Does anyone need anything? And someone messaged me back saying, yes, just need 5 items, like staple basic items, I'll send you a list. No problem, I said. And I've got the list here. He said he wanted a bag of potatoes, a packet of chicory, a tin of macadamia nuts, a pint of goat's milk, and Rexel staples, size number 56. And I'm not being funny, but I'm happy to do people a quick favour and look like a good person. But I didn't realise this was Challenge Annika and this list was going to be so comprehensive. But for all of us, I think it's very hard work, particularly in this environment when our work and our self-identity are completely bound together. So if your job is your career and it's part of how you see yourself, these are really exceptionally tough times, especially when we're thinking about the possibility of furloughs, of redundancy, of all the uncertainty that we have around us at the moment. There's a big pressure to prove your worth and to be visibly and quantifiably valuable. And I think that's across every possible profession and every possible career. I'll tell you a secret. Someone asked me what was my biggest, it might have been Lynn earlier in lockdown, what's your biggest anxiety about what happens after the pandemic? And if I was very honest, I'd say it's that another religious Jewish woman discovers that she's funny and she comes out of Corona as a star in her own right, and I lose all my USP. That's my deep, dark secret. But there's also a lot of pressure to learn new skills, to redesign how we do our jobs, which can feel like we're trying to get a round peg into a square hole because none of us had to live like this before, really. So, for example, using Zoom for a million different purposes, most jobs didn't work like that. Certainly not our job. To perform online was very, very unusual. It's not a natural fit for every job or for every person. You look at how teachers are struggling to make sure that they can maintain contact with their students and a fully functioning classroom, some of the time in person, some of the time online. That's very, very tough. And also there's a massive amount of pressure to keep your home clean. And some people felt that naturally before, but now it's not just about keeping it clean and tidy. It's about keeping it presentable for what other people are going to see. How do you want to appear to them? Do you want to appear businesslike? Do you want to appear relaxed and calm and chilled? Do you want to have a blank canvas? Do you want them to see what your home looks like? I'm just realizing that I thought that the camera on this was focused the other way, where I've got much nicer pillows on the couch that isn't that side of the room. We're going to let it go. But I think something we all have in common, and I'm assuming because I don't know you, but I'm imagining we have this in common, is that we want to get things right. You know, these are tough times, but in life generally, as people, we just want to get things right. And whatever that kind of thing is, whatever kind of performance it is, whether that's being at home in your family, whether that's being at work, whether that's standing on a stage, there's still the pressure to get it right and be the best you, present the best you. I was thinking, actually, I get asked to do a lot of charity events for different community groups and whatever. And I was asked to host a raffle for one of the events. And I thought, I'm going to really big it up. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to sell this. And I made sure that I included loads of jokes about the event, about the people, about the charity, about the prizes. And then I got into massive trouble afterwards because apparently I drew the prizes in reverse order, which I didn't know is apparently illegal. So when you do a raffle, it always has to be the first prize first. But for me, it felt more natural to do like the lowest prize and build up, because that's how we work in our industry. We start with the lowest comic, but usually you're always aiming for the headliner to be the closing act. But in fairness, I don't know how many people would have done a better job than me, because the three prizes were all equally weird and awful. They were a bottle of supermarket plonk type wine, one of those pairs of glasses which are like straws that you can put into a cup, and there's a soap on the rope which is in the shape of a very disgraced pop star who I will not tell you who that was. So I mean, you tell me what order they should have been in, but anyway, I got it wrong and I felt shame and embarrassment. I think pressure to perform, the way that affects some of us, and certainly me, is that I always feel bad if I feel I could have done better. And it doesn't really matter what the reception was of other people. It matters that I feel I didn't give it my 100%. And I think that's common in a lot of performers. But for us, where it's our job, we still have to go back the next day and do it again and get it right. a very well-known comedian who's a friend of mine told me that they suffer from terrible stage fright. And I couldn't imagine that, because they've been performing for 30 years or something. And we did a gig together and we were backstage, and I saw them pacing and panting and talking to themselves and muttering. And I said to them afterwards, you know, what is all that about? And they said, it's just a huge anxiety of wanting to please everybody. And before I go on stage, I feel sick, I'm shaking, I'm nervous, I think they're going to hate me, I think I'm going to get everything wrong, I'm going to forget all my jokes. And then I go on stage, and within 1 second, everything's delightful. I relate to the audience, I make them laugh, it's brilliant atmosphere, everything's perfect. And then the minute it finishes, I come off and I say to myself, I'm never going to put myself through that again. What a nightmare. And then the next day I'll go back and do it again, because that's my job. And I think a lot of people might feel like that about their jobs. I've got some advice for you. I tried to narrow it down to some really concrete pieces of advice. I think other people will have their own advice to share, maybe later on Twitter. But these are my thoughts. I've got a nice list, and I'm going to scroll down my list for you now. So my first bit of advice, and I think this is really important, is that you don't have to do everything today. I feel like that's something I should say to myself every morning. You don't have to do everything today. There'll be more time, things will be left over. When we worked in offices, and I have worked in them in the past, you did your job till the end of the working day. Sometimes you might have to send another email later, but you knew that the next day you'd come back in and you'd get on with the rest of the stuff on your to-do list. That was very normal. I think while we're at home, there's a pressure to get everything finished. Treat it like work. It is work. Whatever you're having to perform, if it's with your children, actually treat them like work. I don't mean that, but you have the next day to get everything right and to get everything perfect. You don't have to have every school uniform laid out on the end of the bed. They only need the one they're going to wear that day. Sometimes not even that one. So just remember that you don't have to do everything today. You don't have to accomplish everything. You don't have to achieve all your goals. Prioritize what actually needs to be done, and don't make yourself more stressed than you need to. The second piece of advice comes from my best friend, and she always says to me, just remember, if it's not my circus, they're not my monkeys. That is her favorite expression, and I think it's really, really helpful, because we only have to deal with what we have to deal with, and we don't have to take on other people's stress and anxiety that doesn't belong to us. So much as I want to help my neighbours with their shopping, if I'm just popping to Tesco's Express, they might not sell Rexel staples size 56. Perhaps they don't have a tin of macadamia nuts, because really their focus is on pints of milk and newspapers. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Do what you can do, and things that aren't yours, don't take them on. My next piece of advice is a lovely one, I think, which is to find your tribe. Find your tribe, whether that's online or in real life, people that you connect to, people that you relate to, people that you share things with, whether that's a particular TV program that you're interested in, whether that's a hobby that you've taken up, something crafty, whether it's just gossip and you want to be in one of the Facebook groups, which is about moaning. There are quite a lot to choose from. But if you find people that you can connect to, then everything is lifted, because a problem shared really is a problem halved. And also fun shared is fun doubled. Isn't that amazing? I should say I have dyscalculia, so maths is not my thing, but I think the maths of that is still okay. But really, when you find your tribe, you find people that you can relate to and people that you can chat to and feel relaxed with, whether that's online or in person, as much as what in person can be at any point in time at the moment, then it helps you remember a sense of who you are. You regain that sense of yourself. And when you can go out and meet people, do. Don't just stay in your house all the time, do. Very important advice now. Separate your workspace and your home space. So however big or small the place that you live is, you can find a way to make that happen. So have an area where you do your work and where your computer might be, where your documents might be kept. If you have anything on paper, does that still happen now? I don't know. But find a place which is that, and that's what you use that space for. And then everything else is still your home, and it doesn't belong to your work frame of mind. And if you're in somewhere very small, then put everything away when you finish working, so you're not seeing it in front of you. And not only that, but separate your work day and your home life, because this is not your office all the time, 24 hours a day. This is advice I should be telling my husband, actually. I will go in afterwards and make sure he knows that. But seriously, your working day is your working day. Your home life is your home life. And just because the computer's sitting there, it doesn't mean you have to be on it all the time. And when I come to that, when it's bedtime, switch off your laptop, switch off your phone. If something important happens, you will find out. But make sure that you have good sleep hygiene and turn it all off when it's not the time to be using it. Very, very important advice now. There is no need whatsoever to bake sourdough, crochet, or start a podcast. And I fully appreciate that that third one is very hypocritical coming from me. But honestly, it's not compulsory to do any of those things. If you've done them, fine, good on you. If you've done something else, brilliant, amazing. If you haven't, that's okay too. None of it is compulsory. And remember that everybody's online world is just their edited highlights. So when you see all that stuff, they're only showing you what you want to see. One of my friends runs a mum's group, and I know that on her group, there's always people putting photos up of the amazing things they've built in the garden during lockdown. They have clearly had expert builders in to do that. It's edited highlights. I mean, you think this is my water? It's gin. I've got pajamas on underneath this. I've only dressed up the top half. Edited highlights. Two small bits left. One is this: when you finish the whole of Netflix and Amazon, watch nature. It's free. It's constantly updating. It's right outside your window. You don't even have to go anywhere. That's an excellent, excellent bit of advice, because getting out, getting fresh air changes your perspective and gives you breathing space. And finally, find something to laugh about every day. So if you haven't got funny things in your normal life, seek it out online. But find something to laugh about, because for as long as we're laughing, we're not crying, and the pressure can go away. Thank you.
Fabulous. Always fabulous, Rachel. Thank you so much. I love your advice about not having to achieve all your goals. And I'm going to take that away with me, because every day I write a really long list and I never ever finish it, and I become slave to the list, and I'm sure that will resonate with a lot of people. And I also think the inspiration from nature is really important as well, because it's lovely, isn't it? And we're seeing things that we've not seen because there aren't so many planes in the sky and there aren't so many cars on the road. It's so wonderful.
I know, it's amazing. And this particular time of year, it's really beautiful outside. I mean, autumn and spring are just as beautiful as each other in different ways. And you see the colours of the leaves changing. It changes all the time. And I think sometimes we're too busy. I mean, I say that for myself as well. You know, we're too busy looking at a screen or looking at an audience or looking at our notes to remember that there's the whole world out there.
And share that on your social media. I've been sharing pictures of Rochester Castle, where I live, because it is stunning and beautiful, and it's far more interesting. I occasionally put myself in the picture, but you know, it is actually interesting that, you know, the history around us. A question, a top tip for, please, could you give us a top tip for people that aren't naturally, I think everyone's creative, but the question was for people who aren't naturally creative. The second part of the question, do you believe everyone has a bit of creativity in them?
I think everyone does have a bit of creativity in them. It's just about finding something that you're interested in. You don't have to become a professional wood turner just because this is lockdown. Just find something you enjoy doing and do it for as long as you enjoy it. Don't laugh at me, but years ago I did street dance lessons and hip hop lessons. I'm a middle-aged Jewish mother, but I did it because it was fun. And it was a form of exercise, and it was actually a class full of mums, and none of us were going to go on Britain's Got Talent. Ashley Banjo had nothing to worry about. Honestly, he was fine, but it was enjoyable. I think just find something that is an outlet for you. I have a cousin who's super corporate in her everyday life, and she broke a plate in her kitchen, and it was a very elaborate plate. Someone had bought her, all very colourful, and the way it fell together, she thought, oh, that looks nice. And she's honestly taken up what's it called when you put all the little bits of mosaic. Yes, I couldn't think of the words. So she's taken up mosaic as her outlet, and actually her work now is gorgeous, but she made a lot of very duff things, but she enjoyed doing it until she became good at it. She enjoyed it. That the only important thing is that it makes you feel creative and happy and productive.
There are some really there's a few nice comments coming through actually. So someone called My Super Connector is saying that she's got comfy tracksuit bottoms on.
Excellent.
And slippers. We like that. That's brilliant. And a glamorous dress and necklace on the top half. Brilliant. I have another question for you. I want to link it to something I was going to pick up on your talk. The question was, what are your coping strategies for writer's block or a creative block? And I wanted just to very quickly unpack, because we need to move on, but let's unpack that whole thing about stage fright, because you mentioned it. And I suffer from stage fright. And one of the things that to remember is that when you're fight or flight, adrenaline rushes in, it blanks your mind. And my top tip for that is always to breathe. So what are your top tips?
For in terms of stage fright, I don't really get stage fright for comedy. I get it for things like if I had to talk to a room full of academics, because that's not how I perceive myself, because I'm not one. So that's why I don't perceive myself like that. So everyone has their context that they get anxious about. I think the two things that I do, one is I quite like a power stance. So if you stand like Wonder Woman with your shoulders back and your hips forwards, and you can't feel small and insignificant in that stance. So a power stance for a couple of minutes in the toilets does a lot of good things for your brain. And the other thing is that I tell myself, okay, so in the film Four Weddings and a Funeral, one of the characters says to the other, everybody always wants to be the person who goes to a wedding where somebody goes, when they say, is there a reason why they shouldn't wed? And someone interrupts the wedding. I can't remember. It's written a lot better in their script. But I think actually the truth is, in most situations, people just want you to do well. So whether that is speaking in front of your team in a meeting, whether that is speaking at your child's wedding, whether it's any context where you have to do something in front of other people, the majority of people want it to go well because everyone wants to have a nice time. So as long as you remember that this is not a room full of your enemies. If it is a room full of your enemies, that's very bad luck. But generally,
you shouldn't be there to start with then, really.
Generally speaking, people just want everything to be as positive as possible for them and for you. So just go in what they call in psychology, unconditional positive regard. Assume I'm going to like them, they're going to like me. And that's what I try and tell myself. And regards to writer's block and creative block, there's a couple of things you can do. One is there are loads and loads of exercises. You can find them online, or if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I can send you some. There are lots of exercises for just exploring ideas. And then when that idea tickles your fancy, that's the one that you focus on and move forward with. But for us, it's a bit different because for us, it's our job. So if we get a call saying there's a plumbing company that wants you to come and do a 20-minute set at their Christmas party, I'm not an expert on plumbing or, unsurprisingly, Christmas. So, but for that set, I do the preparation and I think, okay, what can I find in that's funny? And if you're not a funny writer, then it could be what's interesting, what's scary, what's weird. You can choose your methodology, but I think it's just about finding something to trigger or spark an idea. And we all throw away loads of ideas before we find the ones that work.
Yeah, lovely. Come back in a bit, Rachel. That was fantastic. Okay. We'll unpack some more of that when we've listened to Jo. That was fantastic. So thank you very much, Rachel. And I'm going to introduce Jo Fletcher-Cross. So on my little survey, Jo said that her biggest challenge during lockdown was, I think a lot of people will identify with this one, Jo, losing my long commute. I don't miss wrestling with the vagaries of Greater Anglia every day, but I'm bereft at the loss of time to watch Gogglebox and all the rubbish that my husband doesn't enjoy watching. I get that. And writing and working on the train, of course. Yeah. The thing she's most proud of, which is very much of our time, is being part, and actually very, very topical, being part of a research group on COVID testing. So Jo does a self-test every 2 weeks. I can now swab my tonsils like a pro without throwing up in the mirror. Lovely thought. And also her other achievement is keeping her kid alive and reasonably happy. But yeah, I think that's brilliant that you signed up. I've just signed up for some sort of study to do with COVID as well. So we should all do it. Now, Jo is a journalist, editor, playwright and stand-up comedian. What is there not to your bow, Jo? By day, she is editorial manager at an independent publishing house and content specialist, and she oversees more than 50 publications a year, as well as major events, awards, digital and video products. By night, she performs stand-up around the UK and overseas, including the prestigious Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal. And she also delivers comedy and writing workshops. And I believe you're doing a bit of studying as well, Jo, which isn't here either, but there's a lot going on in your life.
Yeah, I'm doing a master's.
Anyway, it's very inspirational. So I'm going to hand over to Jo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn, for that lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. I was going to say I'm delighted to be here, but I mean, I'm not actually. I'm delighted to be with you. That's a better way to put it, isn't it? Yeah, so like Lynn says, my life revolves around comedy, travel journalism and live events. So I think it would be fair to say that it has been a fairly stressful year this year, and I am questioning my life choices, but here we are, you know, we're working through it and we're going to get there. It's going to be okay, isn't it? I feel that now. So on top of all that, now obviously, like lots and lots of us, I now work from home. Before this crisis, I looked up some stats and it said that only 7% of the workforce did that the whole time, and about 20% of us said they did it on occasion. So you would occasionally work a day, which was very like me. At the moment, the figures are about 60% of the adult workforce. I think it might actually have gone a bit higher than that again. And they were still working from home. And the latest government advice this week has now said that those who can work from home should do so until April. So here we are, we're stuck here. So even if you don't work from home, you're going to be doing a lot of video calls for wherever it is you work. So yeah, so like I say, here we are. Those of us with kids, I've got a 9-year-old and 2 teenage stepkids. We have to deal with that too. The occasional bouts of homeschooling. If a bubble's burst at school, it feels a bit less daunting, I think, although it's still exhausting after 5 months of it earlier in the year, but they're not here all the time now. This, as you can see, is not a lovely swish office. This is actually my teenage stepdaughter's bedroom, which I've repurposed. I think it's the only teenager's bedroom in the country where I had to put up more fairy lights. I've got loads now because it got really dark suddenly when the clocks went back. So I've got loads kind of in front of me that you can't see, but they cheer me up. On top of that, like lots of us, I've got pets. I've got a couple of real idiot cats, one of whom really likes to get in video calls, and she's been asleep next to me this whole time, which is quite weird. Normally she likes to get in. She's just woken up, so she might just appear. So I'm sorry if she does. So, but that's what we're all contending with, isn't it? That's what's happening. When this all began, I was suddenly working from home. I'd been going into the office 5 days a week and a long commute. You know, I got up at 5 and I got home at 7 most days, except when I was gigging, when I'd get home at midnight. So suddenly to be stuck at home felt very weird. And I spent, I mean, at least a week just stuck. I couldn't think what to do. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to communicate with people. I didn't know what I was going to ever get anything done. I work in a job that requires constant communication, and I didn't know how that would work stuck in a room all by myself. But actually, apart from the odd technical mishap, which happens to us all, it's actually been okay. It's worked out okay. And what I've realized is that everything I've been doing in my life feels like it's kind of been leading up to this time. And I'm pretty sure that there will almost certainly be things in your life that have been leading up to that too. And you might have realized that by now, or maybe you just need to have a think about it and utilize them. You know, we're still here for a good few months yet. There's still time for us to get better at this. I think the thing that's staring us in the face now in the way that it didn't used to is our faces, literally our faces. We do so many video calls and I am forced to confront my face in a way I've never had before. I used to avoid going to the hairdresser because I didn't like looking in the mirror for an hour. But now I'm like, yeah, cut my hair if I can ever see a hairdresser again. You can turn the video off. I know, I believe people do that. I've seen people do that, but I'm here to urge you not to do that. As a stand-up comedian, I record all of my sets, and it tends to be an audio recording, but if I can, I will video them, and I'll always either listen to them back the next morning, or watch the video back the next day. And that clearly is absolutely hideous. You know, if anyone who's listened to their voice back will recognize how cringy that is. But it's really, really useful. It helps me see what works. You know, my memory of the night might be that it was absolutely dreadful and nobody laughed, or that everyone was laughing for 10 minutes and it was the best thing I'd ever done. But, you know, the recording has the reality. I can see what worked, what didn't work, what I should use again, what I should rework. Also in a video, you can see how you're performing, what gestures, you know, distract, what looks good, what makes you look stronger, what makes you look better. Look at your habits. Don't be afraid of looking at yourself in a video call. It's okay. Do you like what you look like? Do you like how you're presenting? If not, think about how you can change that. You can stand up, you can move around, you can do what you like. You're the master of your own video call. If you see the things, you can change them. So don't be afraid of it. It's okay. Rehearse. I would love to be the kind of comedian who steps on stage and they can improvise for 20 minutes. You know, if you've been to a comedy club and you see a great compere and they're really riffing off the audience, it's so brilliant. And I love that, but I can't really do it. I'm getting better at it. I can riff off of an idea, but when I got up there, I've got a structure and I've got key lines that are committed to memory. So I know I have to get to those points in my set. When I'm presenting an event for work, I know what I need to get across and why. I go over it beforehand. You don't need to rehearse every Zoom meeting. That would be crazy. But if you're not feeling confident about getting a point across, you know you're going to be in a large meeting, it can be difficult to make your voice heard. Write down those key points. You can open up Zoom or you know, whatever video software you use, and you'll come up so you can practice. How does it look when you practice in the video? How do you feel about what's around you? You know, give it a go. See what you look like. Know what it feels like to say it. Think about what kind of response you might get. That's a really good thing to rehearse. You know, people always ask if we get heckled lots as a comedian. Of course, I never do, but that's not true. You do. You get responses, and thinking about what those responses might be will help you have an answer up your sleeve. So you might look like you've come up with a real witty riposte, or you know, a fabulous you know, answer to Nigel from accounts, but it's just that you've written it down because you expected it. You knew it was coming. You might feel really stupid. You might feel worse if you don't get to put your point across. So I would say give that a go. The other thing that I've really embraced, I'm still a bit shambolic, but I'm pretty analog. You know, organization. When I'm presenting a live event, I do, you know, in the old times, I used to do a lot of live events for work, and I would use cue cards. Everyone, even if I had a PowerPoint presentation, I really like to have physical cards in my hand. It's just something that I feel comfortable with. But I try and be really discreet about them. Not that I was trying to hide it, but, you know, not, you know, just kind of having them here. The best thing about this, and possibly the thing that I'm going to miss most when we go back to the real world, is that you can just have all your notes everywhere. It's so good. I'm like, yeah, you can't see that I've got written down here. I've got it all over here. I did an event online a couple of months ago, and I was told very specifically that I wasn't to mention one particular thing, and I was absolutely terrified. You know, there was going to be a proper faulty terror situation, you know, don't mention the war. So I had post-its all around my computer screen saying, don't mention this, don't mention this. And it fortunately, it worked. It could have had the opposite effect. But, you know, you can do what you like. That's the thing. Nobody can see what you're doing. You can find your own way to organize. I think we're all on screens so much at the moment, constantly. You know, I've spent all day on screens today, and I'm sure lots of you have too. And like I said, when I first came home and was stuck here, I was in the office, I was really addicted to Trello. Some of you probably use that, or other organizational software. And I just, you know, it helped me run my day. I couldn't use it. I couldn't use something that was another screen. So I've now got a real, I've got a whiteboard. I've got my little analog whiteboard, and I have to write everything on it. If I don't write it on it, it doesn't get done. So all my calls, everybody I'm calling today, here we are. 4:45, Funny Women. So, you know, I'd recommend that very highly. If, like me, you get a bit stuck with having technology everywhere, it's a really good thing. Do what works for your brain. You know, my brain is not failing. I'm not failing, but my brain is a bit all over the place sometimes. I really have to take some time out, and I'd advise that you do that too. It's really worth it. Yesterday, I had 4 video calls, one after another, and in between my 3rd and 4th call, I went downstairs to make a cup of tea, and I thought at the time, we've got a bread maker, and I thought at the time I'll just put a loaf of bread on so it's ready for packed lunches tomorrow. And in the course of doing those 2 quite simple tasks, I managed to, I put 15 grams of butter on a teaspoon, and instead of putting that in the bread, I put it in my mouth and ate 15 grams of butter. I then poured 280 milliliters of water into my toaster, which I was not using in this process at all, and blew up the toaster, and then had to reset the fuses in the house. And when I finally got upstairs to go on my 4th video call, I discovered that I'd put the salt for the bread into my tea. So what I'm saying is, take a break. Sometimes we just need to take a break, and maybe don't try to multitask absolutely everything, because it won't always work. We've talked a little bit about how you look. Like I've said, this is not a plush office. You know, it's my stepdaughter's bedroom. I got to buy some nice cushions, and that cheered me up. As for me, you know, if you can work at home and be on video calls in your pajamas, I strongly endorse that, and I think you should do it. I will, if I can. If I'm not on an important meeting, I absolutely will. But at the moment today, I'm wearing this dress because this is one of my favourite dresses to go gigging in, and I miss that, so it makes me feel good when I wear it. But I am also wearing leg warmers. Someone told me about this. They said, wear leg warmers if you're working from home. It will cut your bills. Not only that, I feel like a kid from Fame. And if I was a kid from Fame, I'd kick my leg up so you could see my leg warmers, but I'm not. So just imagine them. They're really good. Wear something you like. If you've got something important to do, then, you know, put something you like on, something you feel comfortable in. I talk about this all the time. When I finally get back to gigging, I'm going to have to wear it to every gig. I bought a sequined catsuit for my first solo show that was going to happen this year, which has very much not happened. So the sequined catsuit hasn't had as much wear as I thought it would. So I wore it to a couple of Zoom parties. I was going to wear it tonight, actually. I thought about wearing it tonight because I talked about it a little while ago, but it's a bit short in the body, so it's not very comfortable to sit down in. So I thought I wouldn't. But, you know, if you've got a sequined catsuit, maybe don't wear it to a meeting with the bank manager, but, you know, wear it if wear it for drinks with your friends. It's fun. You can still have fun with things. Feel comfortable in what you're doing. Think about your background. You can do Zoom backgrounds. I hate them. So I think they never work. You're always kind of in and out, and they're a bit weird. I did an event not that long ago for the Spanish Tourist Board, and for that I'll show you, I bought this poster on eBay of Spain. That was £3, and I stuck some Spanish flags up, and they thought it was really funny and they really liked it. Fortunately, they loved it. You know, we're in our houses. It's okay for them to look like our houses. Don't worry about it. And my final point, and the one that I think is most important, is remember that your skills are still your skills. I know we're all supposed to be writing a novel. I'm sure you all wrote a book and did your sourdough, etc. in the first lockdown. But if you haven't picked up loads of new skills, that's okay. The ones that you had before the lockdown, you still have. If you're great at leading a meeting, then you still are. If you're a warm and engaging presenter, then you still are. And if you're brilliant at listening and taking away notes and coming up with ideas, you still are. Just be you, and it'll all be okay, and we'll get through it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant advice, and I do really look forward to the day when you present yourself in your silver catsuit, boiler suit. What do we call it?
Well, it's not really a catsuit, that's a question, I think, but it is, yeah, boiler suit. That'll do. It's fabulous, and I will wear it everywhere.
Well, there will definitely be a time. Just a couple of very quick questions before we bring everyone back in. I think you covered the whole thing about Zoom fatigue brilliantly. So unless you've got anything else to say on that, I think we covered that off. There's been lots of lovely comments in the chat about what people are wearing. Super Connector is actually a lady called Jennifer, who is clearly, what did she say? She said something about, oh no, that was Linda, who's invested in sheepskin slippers. Oh. Very lovely. Yeah, so there's lots of comments in there, Joe, you can look at about clothing, popping a jumper over your catsuit.
Why not put a jumper over the catsuit?
Or over the cat, as the case may be. A really good question, slightly different tack, but I think we both work with lots of other people, and I think it's a good one. Do you have any fun suggestions for online team activities in the workplace?
Oh, that is a good question. I've actually been looking at this this week, because I'm sure it's the same for everyone. Although it's a little bit better now that the vaccine is in sight, and other changes have happened in the world over the last few weeks, which are making me feel a bit more hopeful. But I think, especially for my younger colleagues, I really worry about them kind of stuck in flat chairs, and it's really difficult. So I've been looking into things. I think it depends on, I think you have to know what people's sensibilities are. There's a lot of suggestions of kind of group karaoke online. And I genuinely think I'd rather die. And I used to run a karaoke bar, but I don't want to do karaoke with my boss on Zoom. But I saw a couple of good ones. I can't remember the name of the website. Maybe somebody will know it, but there's a kind of website where you can make up a quiz and kind of share that among people and do cool quizzes. And I thought that might be quite, they were like, why not do questions about your team, your targets? And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But, maybe Eurovision hits of 1999, we could do a question, or, that kind of thing. So I think maybe things like that, where everyone gets a chance to contribute without feeling that they're on show, because not everyone is comfortable with that. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think it's really important not to put people under too much pressure, because not everybody feels comfortable in this space. And, I think what both you and Rachel have covered is the fact that this is our homes. This is where we are exposing ourselves, aren't we, in a different way, that we're not used to this. And whereas I suppose because we all work in comedy, we're used to seeing a different side of people. But in this environment, humor, I think, is really important. I think you're allowed to be funny. It gives you good cut through. But I think maybe some other people have got thoughts on the team activities, because that's I'd be very happy to share that in the chat. Okay. Well, I think on that happy note, thank you, Joan. Let's bring back Rachel and hopefully Natalie, and hopefully we have Natalie, and do we have James? This is the great, and we have James. There he is.
Yeah. The Wi-Fi finally worked.
Yes, he's not wearing a silver cat suit, but James.
No.
Poor James. Do you want to just say a quick hello, since you were cut off earlier?
Yeah, it's great to be here. I love being part of supporting women in business at NatWest, and we've run some really great events, of which we've done together, Lynn.
Yes, we have. Yes,
we even made the BBC local news. So
we did.
As a dad to two young girls, I'm so passionate about reducing all the barriers that we can, to female entrepreneurship. And so this is brilliant. I've actually had a really good laugh, Joe and Rachel, so thank you very much for that as well. Brilliant.
Natalie, have you got any questions for our lovely speakers?
No, it was great to hear what you said. I've actually taken a note of what you said. It's not my circus, so they're not my monkeys. I love that. So I think I'll be using that next time. What you said, if we do get dressed, I am a culprit to not just put makeup on and a shirt and then normally have pajama bottoms on or something underneath. So I think we're all guilty of doing that, aren't we?
I was going to say, and I'm very happy to discuss this, but not, everyone's got their own view about clothing. But the thing I think is the most important is to wear something I like Joe. I will wear something I like. I've got some favorite shirts I feel comfortable in. This is one of my favorite shirts. So I've always dressed like I'm in a Zoom call anyway, with a black bottom half with a big shirt. So, but that tip, it makes you feel good. And if you want to wear your slippers, that's fine. Did you want to say something, Rachel?
Not specifically about that, although I was listening to Jo when she talks about feeling like the kids from Fame in her leg warmers. And one of the biggest pressure points I've had this entire lockdown is that for my podcast, You Talking to Me, I interviewed my childhood iconic hero, which is Valerie Landsberg, who played Doris Schwartz in Fame. And I was obsessed with the show Fame and with her, funny Jewish woman. I'd never seen anyone at all like me on television before. And I was obsessed all through my childhood and my teens. And I told her that when I got to be in a show when I was 11 and I had a solo in the show and it was in a real theatre, I stood on the front of that stage and in my head, I was Doris Schwartz. But before the show, before we recorded that show, I told our producer that forget producing anything. Your only job is to make me look cool in front of that woman. So I just wanted to reassure people that I might have come over very calm and collected, but I can still lose the plot with someone who really means something.
I just think that's the best segue from leg warmers into promoting your own podcast I've ever heard. And that is because we're all brilliant in comedy, you know. That's but no, and I have to say that particular episode is fantastic. So do listen to it. James, have you got any questions for our speakers?
I think for me, how do you remain funny on screen when you're feeling really nervous, and you keep that? How do you keep going if people aren't laughing at you? Like, for instance, you, Joe, you talked about watching back some of your videos. How do you polish that up? How do you do that? Because one of the best gigs I ever went to was Jimmy Carr, and the best bit about that gig was when he ad-libbed, or when he dealt with hecklers, and I found him more funnier dealing with hecklers than I did with his act. How do you do that? How do you come up with those things? How do you think about that?
Get an answer from Joe and Rachel on that, actually. Joe.
It's just natural genius. No.
It is with Joe.
Do you know what? I think it's interesting to say about kind of him dealing naturally with people rather than the scripted stuff. Rachel will probably have more to say on this than me, but I think having something up your sleeve, the idea of knowing that somebody might heckle you and having something that you can say is really important. So just being prepared. And like I said, you know, like if you're going through not just being funny, but if you're in a meeting and you know you've got to get something across, thinking about objections that people might make to it is something that I think is really important, thinking through what the next step will be. And it's the same thing, really, just thinking through what the next step is going to be and potential branches that you might go off on.
I think Joe explained that perfectly. It is the same context. It is knowing, trying to perceive what the person might object to, but also someone like Jimmy Carr, he's got years and years and years of put downs he's used on hecklers in other gigs that he can draw from in his rucksack, his mental rucksack. So I think you know, that's one of the ways. Also, heckling, it's funny because a lot of people say, oh, I love the way they dealt with that heckler, but heckling is very difficult for a lot of audiences because they've paid £10 to see Jimmy Carr, not to see some woman or bloke in the corner trying to be funnier than Jimmy Carr. So that can make quite a difficult atmosphere for the rest of the room. So you always have to work out, is it worth at this moment dealing with that heckler and veering from the brilliantly written story arc of your comedy when you're just getting to that bit that grabs everyone, or is it worth sort of giving a throwaway remark and just carrying on? So you're weighing up a lot of decisions at the same time, and again, that is translatable to really any context, to parenting, to office presentations. I mean, I don't know much about nuclear physics, but I imagine it's similar for them.
I'm just going to add to that and say that, to put it in a business context, so if you're starting your own business and you're having to present to people, obviously over sort of screens at the moment, but when we go back into the real world again, remember, you know the most about your business. You know it inside out. You've written the presentation, you've done the pitch for finance, you've done all of that, you know it. And it's about trusting that you know your material, and that's the biggest transferable skill I would ever say to anyone. Those comedians like Joe and Rachel who get up there and can do their show. I mean, how many times do you Rachel's done lots of Edinburgh shows. She knows her material over and over again, and you draw that down. You've got that in your head. You have to trust it, and it's exactly the same if it's a business presentation. And if you just let yourself go, it will come. It's when we get ourselves into that panic mode that we forget what we're going to say, or we get flustered. Somebody said in the chat a bit earlier about blinking a lot and worrying. All the time you're worrying about those things, you're taking your brain away from what the main purpose of it is, which is to tell your story. Would you agree, girls?
Yeah, but also the more you know your stuff, the more flexible you can be with deviating from it. So, you know, like people say, oh, it seems so spontaneous, it's whatever. We rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. And once it's your second, a bit like when you learn to drive. If you remember learning to drive at the beginning, you have to constantly think, mirror, signal, maneuver, seatbelt, maybe not in that order, but you have to constantly be thinking. And then one day you're in your lesson and the driving instructors asked you some question and you chatted to them and you thought, oh, for the last 5 minutes I haven't had it's been on like almost like autopilot. So we never get to autopilot with our work, because it's every time you perform it's different. It's a different audience, it's a different atmosphere, it's a different room. But when you're comfortable in what you know and what you're saying, then you can have fun with taking little segues here and there and jumping off into a different topic for a few minutes, because you know you can bring it back.
There's a great question here, but which I think was aimed at both Joe and Rachel, but actually I want to ask James and Natalie, because I think it'd be interesting to hear their perspective. Are there any lessons, or has anything come out today about stand-up and performance that you can apply to being a business person or on your working life, or being an entrepreneur? James?
That's a great question. I think from listening to you both, Joe and Rachel, it's be yourself and be true to what you're good at. And when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you've got to find that thing that you're really passionate about. And if you're really passionate about it and it comes from within, and it's something that lights you up on the inside, like a hobby, you talked about hobbies tonight, finding those outlets as well, that really light you up. And what is that will drive you through when you have those dark moments, when things aren't going your way, when failure hits? How can you learn from that and not view it as failure, but view it as a mistake, something you can learn from, and then you can turn that into a positive? I think those for me are those key bits.
And Natalie, what about you? What's your experience through lockdown and working with customers?
Lockdown's been fun for me because I've got a 3-year-old daughter who tends to make a guest appearance on my Zoom call, so I'm surprised she hasn't come in already. But just what you just said then is an unnatural situation. And, we are like earlier on today, we didn't know James's internet connection was going to go off at the second we went live. These things just happen, and you do just have to improvise and do your best to come out the situation. But it was something that we will learn from, and next time we may log on a little bit earlier and make sure all the connections work. But it is just taking from those experiences and just moving on with them. I think it was you, Rachel, said before, when things don't go perfect, don't worry about them, just move on and move on to the next thing that is a positive thing. And a lot of our entrepreneurs are finding that they've never pitched over an internet connection before. So they're used to seeing people's reaction face to face. And when you can't see your audience, it's slightly harder to pitch because you can just see your own face. So I think, Joe, you said watch yourself back again. And that is what obviously the recommendations, that the top tips they come out with, watch themselves back, see where they can improve. But it's been a challenge for everybody, I think, hasn't it?
I think that's a really great note to end on. I think what a positive end. I want to just say, really important, you're all brilliant. I love tonight's discussion. I want to leave this by saying, let's all be nice to each other. We've got Christmas are coming, or not in Rachel's case. But
it will come anyway.
It will come anyway.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah, happy Hanukkah. Cut yourself some slack, because we've all had a tough time, and you know what, as we've proven tonight, there's always some value to come out of the most difficult situations. Look for the silver lining, look for the opportunity, because together we can do it. We can all collaborate and we can all work together. So thank you so much. We're coming to the end of this discussion. Thanks to all of those of you out there who commented live. That's so great. Thank you to Super Connector Jennifer, who's absolutely brilliant comments, along with her slippers. And no, that was somebody else with the slippers. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody. And quick plug for NatWest. James, Natalie, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you.